I'll just give a background of who Threats is. So Threats is sort of a digital think tank. Think of any digital threats that we face across the African continent, both when it comes to democracy, but tech development as well. I think from my perspective, the challenges that we face, again, as a think tank, is the fast pace at which so many things are changing. Because, for instance, in the new era of artificial intelligence, there's so much happening, and so but everyone is trying to understand how the phenomenon is actually redefining so many ecosystems, from health to democracy to even employment. So I think the biggest challenge for us that we face, again, ethically, is how do we keep, how do we have Africans contribute to such a space that is dominated by the global north? Because again, the challenges that we have within Africa are the lack of data sources, data points, digitized systems, which become very hard whenever we are doing research. Because again, our research is not data driven from a tech perspective. So ethically, again, ethically, when it comes to inclusion, for us, we always face a challenge of how do we actually have African or global South perspectives being acknowledged when it comes to the big players in technology. The other challenge, I think, personally, that I have faced again with the kind of work that we do is because some of our work leans towards accountability, it's always hard to draw the line. Because I will give an instance. There are pieces that we do, there are research pieces that we work on that in that if we ever published them, they would sort of create a ripple effect that would be negative. And I think most times we are caught between a rock and a hard place of, okay, should we publish this? Should we not publish this? Which organization or which person would be best suited to actually utilize this information? Because again, in the ecosystem that we deal in, we have actors who are constantly trying to infringe on our freedom of expression, for lack of a better word. So I think the thin line between, okay, is the research, what's the effect of the research? Will it cause a positive change or a negative change? Other than that, I think the other challenge that we always keep facing again within our sector is the fact that when it comes to conversations again with big tech, the likes of Meta, Google, we are not, ethically speaking, we are not really certified as researchers according to them, and yet they read our reports every now and then when we publish. So ethically speaking, we are at a point of, okay, but in as much as you don't want to listen to us, you're still using our data. So how do we actually draw the middle line, or how do we ensure that the information that we're giving you is up to the standard that you want, but also how does it protect the users of all the platforms that we have, the likes of Facebook, Twitter, with the evolving challenges in the landscape? Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Indeed, democracy and the freedom of expression in Uganda has been quite a challenge in the past years. Are there ways that you have tried to address some of these challenges that you could share with us?
So one of the things we believe is that the biggest elephant in the room is accessing data, but also in terms of public awareness, there are certain particular topics that the public isn't really aware of. So one of the ways that we've thought of bridging the gap is doing in-depth
Could you share
research.
some of those topics?
Okay. Some of the topics, for instance, when we look at misinformation from a perspective of foreign information, manipulation and interference, which is a sort of the elephant in the room whenever countries are heading towards elections. But of course, driving the point home, for instance, currently with the tensions happening within Africa. So in terms of understanding how it's manifesting, it's sort of a gray area again in Africa, because we don't really have too much information about it. Another area is open source investigation. So for instance, when we look at, for lack of a better word, when we look at CCTV cameras, again, littered on the streets, most times, of course, the biggest the biggest reason as to why they exist is because of security, right? But again, from a perspective of a layman or a normal Ugandan, what happens to all that information that is being collected in real time? Again, when government tries to implement aspects of digital number plates, which are attached to cars, how safe is my privacy when it comes to that information being out there? So those are the questions those are some of the topics that we sort of want to interrogate to have an understanding of, but also what's the effect on beyond citizens, on refugees, because again, when refugees get assimilated into a community, they adopt our system. So those are some of the topics that we want to interrogate to sort of understand it, but from a more domestic point of view, because again, we don't have legal frameworks that exist to hold certain people who would probably use such information against us accountable. So because of such gaps that exist, we need to find ways of bridging that, and that's through bringing these conversations on the table. Yeah, so in terms of the work that we do, it's based on research, but also a lot of advocacy, but also speaking to stakeholders, again, to find a middle ground, not only just in terms of freedom of expression, but also looking at the fact that social media plays a huge role in our lives. So how do we hold big tech companies accountable, especially when they infringe on certain rights that we have within the communities, such as unlawfully soliciting your image and creating a catfish account on Facebook? So those are some of the conversations we are looking at bringing up, but also how do we build capacities within the African ecosystem to be able to do this work ourselves? Because again, we rely on experts who are not African to come and actually try and solve and understand these problems. So that's some of the ways we're doing that.
Okay.
I think for me, it was understanding that in the fabrics of community, there is an important essence of understanding one's self-identity to fit into that community, and being part of the network and being part of the fellowship gave me a better understanding and a better picture of that, and looking at the fact that each and everyone has something to contribute at the end of the day. So yeah, that was basically it for me during the fellowship. But as well, I think as Laban said, as Chuck said, being able to take yourself from a place of privilege and put yourself in another person's shoes of what would they say, what would they go through, was redefining for me, because again, sometimes we get caught up in the highs of life that we forget the simplicity. So being able to relate with even the simplest of things was one of the major highlights for me. Yeah. First of all, who am I to speak after the elaborate speech we have had from the president? I think for me, the journey the peer learning experience has been quite different, because everybody brings something different on board. But I think also it's one of those that it's allowed us a space to be vulnerable with each other. Because one of the things I believe is, in order for you to connect with somebody, you need to be vulnerable with them. And that's the deepest connection that you have. I wouldn't say I've had any challenges in terms of the peer support, because when I've experienced different seasons in life, I have always sort of leaned back and asked myself, okay, who can I have this conversation with? Who can actually help me? Both within my cohort, both outside my cohort. Christian is a very good friend of mine, and we sometimes speak about things, and he always mentions how, for you, you're very quick, first slow down. And it sort of reminds me that, okay, take a deep breath, slow down, we'll figure it out. But I think in terms of being a support system, it comes down to being vulnerable with each other, but also being able to show up for each other in particular spaces. And for me, that has been one of the things that has sort of kept me afloat through the different seasons of life, in as much as it's been very wavy. you know? So even if the wave is trying to sort of engulf me, at the back of my mind, I know if I give Dina a call, if I give Edgar a call, we shall start from there. And then I first calm down and figure it out. So in terms of challenges, I wouldn't say they're actually challenges. I would say it's opportunity for personal growth, but it's also opportunity to reflect and become a better version of yourself within the different spaces, because everybody gets a different side to you, and it's important to have that sort of wrapped together in a tiny bow so that people experience the best version of you. Yeah. I think for me, the final take is intentionality. And to tie everything else, it's intentions. We can say we'll do this, we will do this, but the intentions, it again falls back to all of us individually. The network has been created, it's already a movement. It's now upon us to take the initiative, to be intentional about making it meaningful. And I think for all of us here, we've seen how Owl and the team have been intentional about seeing us grow. So what we owe the Institute is to be intentional about how we actually give back to it, but also ensure that we, in our different capacities, grow. I think the other recommendation I'd actually put across is it's very important for us to keep, again, to reiterate what you said, it's important for us to keep the culture of meeting, because meeting meeting each other, whether in small groups, whether in large groups, it brings a sense of community alive, because these are the conversations you will still take on beyond just the fellowship. Because again, we might not meet as all of us, because we know there are people who have social anxiety, but in the small groups of people, how are we making those meaningful connections? So constantly meeting, but also being proactive, because again, they've given us an opportunity to be part of the network. How about we get proactive in being part of everything that the network has to offer, or if there are any activities that the Institute has to do, how about we are proactive in actually taking part in them, instead of us being called every time or summoned every time, you know? It brings up too much formality. How about we have a sense of, hey, I can volunteer to do this. Do you need any help in this? I feel like that's a much better approach, I think, for us as fellows to contribute, but also build the network as time goes on.